Hello and welcome back to the basement. On this episode, we are going to dive into this mid to late 1990s Mexican Fender P bass. Now before I get started, this is not mine. This is a good friend of mine's that I play with from time to time. This is his bass. He bought this bass when he was 16, from what he was telling me. Back in 1996, which is about the same time I really got serious about playing. My PV Cab I bought that same year, about 96 or 97. And so this is this very special bass to him. He's kept it this entire time. He's now about the same age as me. I won't divulge what that is, but if you know me, you know I'm old. Anyway, this is a great example of what Fender was putting out of their Mexico factory back in that time frame, you know, mid 90s to early 2000s. My jazz bass is a 2000 Fender jazz bass out of the Mexico factory, and I love this bass. Both of these basses are pretty heavy. I need to get a fish scale in here that I can weigh things like this, but this is a beefy boy. So it's in the basement today, not to demo, not to review, but to get some work done. So he was gonna send this off to a shop to get work done. And he's like, wait a minute, I know a guy who's, well, pretends to be a luthier at times. So he wanted me to have a look at it. So it's got a couple things going on with it, namely this master volume pot is, doesn't have any stop points anymore. And that's usually not good when it does that. And it just spins. So anyway, I'm not gonna get into like a big time sound demo or anything like that. I'm just gonna run the camera microphone with the amp on, just so you can hear what's wrong with the pot. And then we're gonna go fix that and probably a couple other things that are wrong with it as well, which is not much. He's taking great shape of this, aside from the ugly stickers on the back. Not Florida Gators, man. I'll give him a pass. He went to that school. So anyway, let's fire this thing up and hear what's wrong with it. Anyway, so you heard what's wrong with the pot. Let's go get it on the bench and get this thing stripped down and see what else we can find. All right, so she's in the shop. So I'm gonna go ahead and get the strings off, take a look inside here and see what's going on. I do know he wants a bone nut. I've also identified that this strap buttonhole is stripped out. Cannot tighten the screw any further than this. When I got it, it was kind of, you could push it in and out. So I'm gonna plug the hole, re-tap it, and reinstall the strap button. Gonna give the frets a good clean. He's taking really good care of this bass. I mean, it's got some dings and dents. This was a gigged, very well gigged instrument. One thing I gotta say about this era of Fender basses, these rosewood fretboards were legit dark. My Fender, my jazz bass is about the same. These are nice. So anyway, let's get the strings off. There's a little bit of gunk on the headstock. I'm gonna see if I can't lightly scrape that off. I'm gonna replace the nut with a bone nut. And I'm probably gonna replace both pots just because they should have a matched pair. So I believe this is an aftermarket pickguard. These are certainly not Fender screws. He's got two mismatched, and the rest are all just flat countersunk screws. And he's got two dome heads. Typical rust on the screw heads. The chrome plating has come off of the magnet poles, which is par for the course. He is interested in potentially installing a new pickup. I'm gonna say don't do it. Play with a cap first, and then go from there. We can always slap another pickup in. That's not gonna take a ton of work to do. So let's get this pickguard off. Oh, these are mini pots. And it's a 500K, which makes it brighter. Both of these are 500K pots. Weird. Yeah, that pot's toast. All right, while I'm waiting on hearing back from the owner on which way he wants to go with the electronics, I'm recommending going with a set of 250K CTS pots from Mojo Tone and a 0.047 microfarad capacitor. I've got an Emerson oil and paper cap and a orange drop cap to choose from. So I'm gonna wait till I hear back, see what he wants wired up. In the meantime, I'm gonna try and get this gunk off of the headstock without damaging it. Apparently he left some rubber bands on here for over a decade. Swap out the bone nut, or swap out the nut for a bone nut, and clean up the fretboard. The frets do have quite a bit of wear. If this were my bass, I would recommend a fret job, because there are some craters, especially in these first few frets. Pretty much all the way down the neck, but really in the first position is where it's really noticeable, especially when the camera's moving. You can see those. Anyway, I haven't put a fret rocker on here yet. Let me do that now, actually. But those craters, I mean, it needs a level crown and polish. There's a high fret there, or a low fret. Three. Six frets are really bad. Probably wouldn't take much to chase all this out. Let's see if I can pop this thing out. It might need a little persuasion. There it goes. There she is. Original Fender plastic. All right, so I've got a bone nut right here. I'm gonna go ahead and polish this puppy up and get it fit. All right, so here I am. I'm taking a pencil cut in half lengthways to actually see if the fret slots are where they need to be, or if I need to go down any further. So again, this is just a carpenter's pencil cut down in half so that the lead is right up against the frets, and I'm using that to scribe a line against the nut and seeing where it is in relation to the fret slots, because that's about as low as you want it to be, is the top of the fret.
All right, now I'm moving on to trying to carefully remove as much of this 10-year-old crusty rubber band off of the headstock. I'm just using a razor blade, and I'm using it as a scraper and just applying super, super light pressure. I'm not trying to remove any finish, just trying to get the rubber band off, and then I'm going back with some ceramic graphene wax paste to kind of polish everything up. Now moving on to the rear strap button. You can see me struggling here. It's stripped out inside the hole, so I have to use a couple tricks to get it out. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to plug that hole with a bamboo skewer. Unfortunately, it's slightly undersized, and I don't have a dowel the right size. So I'm just going to use some 30-minute epoxy as a gap filler with that bamboo skewer in combination to plug that hole, and then I'll drill a new hole for the screw for the strap button. So after I let it sit overnight, I trim off the excess, then I mask it off because I want to scrape that flat, and in this case I'm using a small file to get any of that excess epoxy that I pulled up on top to be flush. Just a little touch up with a razor blade, kind of scoring the hole for the drill bit so it doesn't slide. And I'm going really slow apparently.
All right. No movement in the strap button. That's good. Strap button is now done.
All right, now it's time to dig into the rest of the guts here. As I'm working on that, it looks like that ground cable on that output jack is, it looks like it had been soldered more than once. One of the things I'm noticing as I'm taking this thing apart is there are toothpicks in all of the pickguard holes that were used to kind of friction fit the screws that were holding the pickguard down. So I'm like, I can't have that. I'm going to redo that. So I plug every single hole with bamboo skewers and wood glue. Toothpick's a pretty good trick if you've got a stripped out wood screw hole, but again, I'd rather do this right, and that means plug all the holes and re-drill them.
Here's the graphite paint that I use.
So now I'm applying the first coat of graphite paint that I'm using to shield the control and pickup cavities.
All right, so it's the next night. It's time to do the second coat of shielding paint, and then I'm going to pull the neck off the body, and I'm going to start the fretwork.
So smartly, I decided to pull the neck off first so that I can move the body off to the side, not have to worry about the second coat of paint getting touched. Every time I've used this paint, it typically takes more than one coat. So now it's time to start the fretwork. I'm starting just by putting a marker on all the frets and then getting the actual fretboard as level as I possibly can. So I'm using a notch straight edge for that. And this truss rod was fighting me. It hadn't moved in a long, long time. But once I got it cracked loose, then it turned pretty easily. So I'm getting it as flat as I possibly can. So it's a little bit of back and forth. Again, these old Fender necks, they are single action truss rods. So they only increase the bow in the opposite direction of the string tension or let it out. So you can only do so much. So now I've taken the leveling beam to level out the frets and get rid of all the pits, especially in the first position. I typically go back and add a little bit of relief in the 12th fret and up, just to add a little bit of slope so you can get a little bit lower action with less string buzz above the 12th fret. Then I mask everything off, apply more marker to the frets, and now I start crowning it with a traditional triangle safe edged crowning file. It's a tedious process, especially doing everything by hand, but it's definitely rewarding. You just got to be in the mood to do it. And then I like to dress all the fret edges. I don't get a perfect semi-hemispherical fret end, but I do round them off, so it definitely feels worn in. It doesn't, you don't have sharp edges. That's just not fun to play. But they are nice and smooth and comfy. Then it's time to start polishing. And I typically start at 400 grit sandpaper and move my way up to 2000 grit. And I use various abrasives for it. Sometimes I'll use fret rubbers or fret erasers. Most of the time I'll use fret erasers with just with wet dry sandpaper attached to it. As I work up the grits, I usually go across the grain, if you will, basically perpendicular to the frets, to put in some fresh marks so that I can see that I'm polishing those out with the next progressively higher grit. This is more tedious than putting the crowns in with a file. But once you get through the grits, then what I'll do is I'll take it to my bench grinder that has a polishing mop on it. And I'm just using simple jeweler's rouge polish to really bring out the shine in those frets. Not that it's really going to matter, because as soon as you put a round wound nickel string on it, it's going to scratch it and take all that effort to polish it out. But it's still good for a nice... it's still part of the process. You got to do it. I don't know why, but you just got to do it. And typically after I mask everything off with masking tape, I like to make sure, especially on open pore wood like rosewood here, I'll take naphtha to all the spots that had the masking tape and just clean it, make sure it's free of adhesive, and then I'll rehydrate it with some lemon oil. Not bad. All right, now it's time to start reassembly, but before I do that, I'm going to hit the entire body with this really cool wax I found from Turtle Wax. I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head, but it's a graphene ceramic wax, and it's definitely gives a nice, hard, durable shine to it. Cleaning up the pickguard because I'm about to start shielding it with some copper foil tape. And when I shielded the pickup and body cavities, I did kind of go over the edge just a little bit because I wanted that paint to make contact with the copper foil tape to complete that Faraday cage and get rid of any 60 cycle hum. Even though technically a P-bass is a humbucking pickup with that split P configured pickup. Configured? Did I just say configured? I said configured. Configured pickup. Now, I'm no soldering expert, but the more I do these wire ups, the more I enjoy it. I'm not sure why that is, but it's really good once it's fun to do once you start to learn how to do it right. So I'm using a pair of 250K CTS pots from Mojo Tone. That's a matched pair, so they have very, very similar resistance on both ends of the sweep. And I believe these are audio taper pots, which means it's not linear. Audio taper pots are more balanced in the full sweep. So linear has a drop off. I may have it backwards, but it's the nicer of the two. Now for the jack, I'm using a pure tone jack, and this is a 4-prong jack. So it grips the 1/4 inch cable and in 4 places. So there's 4 points of contact. So it's a much, much firmer, solid connection, and it's much harder to pull out. So I really like that one, and this one happens to be gold plated as well. I don't use the gold plated washer and nut. I end up using the silver because I'm putting traditional chrome dome head knobs on this, and I just don't want it to clash. And I'm using a 0.047 microfarad orange drop capacitor for the tone. And then I start using some traditional cloth pushback wire on the rest of the connections. The only wire not changed out in this rewire job is what's going straight to the pickups. I didn't want a chance screwing them up because they are original to the bass. One of these days I'm going to get into winding my own pickups, but I'm not there yet. Definitely not the best at soldering, but like I said before, once you get the hang of it, it's pretty fun to do. One of the things I've learned is to pre-tin everything, from the lugs on the pots to the wires themselves. That just makes everything way easier. Now I'm installing a fresh ground lead, so this gets grounded out at the bridge. So you've got to run that wire through that hole that goes underneath the bridge. And I'm going to clean up all the screw heads as I reinstall stuff. I think the bridge screws and the neck screws are the only screws I end up reusing. I replace all the pickguard screws and the pickup screws with brand new ones. So to clean those up, I'm just using a brass wire brush. Don't go crazy. I'm just starting the screws with the drill. I hand tighten everything. I'm just double checking my wiring against the original wiring harness, if you want to call it that. And it's time to mount the pickups. Don't worry about all those loose wires. I do cable tie everything up and make it nice and clean. But you need some slack on a P base for the pickup leads so you can remove the pickguard without having to take the pickups out. And this was a tight fit with the vintage style full-size pots compared to what was in it before with the mini pots, and that did pose a problem. but I was able to fix it without having to widen the route. It was at the expense of the tone pot, which you'll see later. So now just giving everything a final coat of wax. Now the pickguard and electronics are all in. I'm gonna wax up the back and the sides, and then I'm going to reattach the neck and then commence with the setup. Again, cleaning off those screw heads. A little bit of rust. And just for good measure, I'm going to give the fretboard a second coat of oil, because I believe it's the next day. Anytime I string an instrument, it's just habit. If I've got a raw wood fretboard, I always re-oil it on string changes. So you probably saw a second ago, I just installed the new knobs. Those are Fender American Chrome dome head knobs. So that's standard equipment on like a Telecaster or an American P-Bass. It had the plastic witch hat knobs on there before. I didn't return them to the owner, so he can switch them out, switch them back if he wants, but I think he likes these better. So I'm setting the relief on the neck, and I typically eyeball this. I do have feeler gauges, so if it's not doing what I need it to do and doesn't feel right, then I'll break out the feeler gauges, but I can get really, really close. I generally look between the 7th and the 9th fret for the relief, and then I go back through and do string height and saddle height adjustments. I'm thinking I'm setting this action to 2 millimeters, which is about 1/4 of a millimeter higher than I would keep it. I usually like 1.75, something like that, which is really low for a bass. But that's just how I like it. But I know he likes, the owner of this bass likes a little bit taller action, so I'm setting it slightly higher at 2 millimeters. Now I got the string height done. Now I'm trying to intonate it. And as I go through that,
so I'm not sure what happened here, but the tone pot wouldn't turn. So I pulled it open and this lug broke off. Not sure how, but it did. It still works fine. There's no scratchiness, nothing is wrong with it. But I'm gonna go ahead and replace it anyway, because I've got another one that matches, and I just can't give this to my friend like that. I would keep it in there because no harm, no foul, but this is for a friend. So do it right, or don't do it at all. So I'm gonna swap that out, then I'll do the tone demo.
I just would not have been okay with giving him his bass back with that knob I knew it was jacked up. He wouldn't know. There was no way he would know unless he opened it up, but I would know. So no big deal. I had the extra pot. It was part of a matched set of 3 that I had for a different project, so it was no problem just to swap it back out and more carefully reinstall it.
Okay, so I just adjusted the string height up, swapped the tone pot out, and got it back together, and I'm good to go. So this is volume all the way up, tone all the way up, and I have no idea what I'm going to play. I'm just going to play clean. I'm not going to use any effects other than my EQ preamp, compressor. That's it. So that's it. It's just going to be direct into my DAW, plus the camera mic, and I'll toggle back and forth. Well, it's got tone for days. This thing's a monster. This is a great old 90s made in Mexico P bass, and it's got better tone than it did before when I got it. Well, maybe not better, just different. It's got American spec parts in it with the exception of the pickups. So this has a pure tone 4-pin, so the pure tone jack with the multiple contact prongs. Still the same number of lugs for soldering. Fender USA control knobs, Mojo Tone 250K pots. I've got a 0.047 microfarad orange drop capacitor, and then cloth pushback wire throughout. I replaced pickup screws. I replaced pickguard screws. I shielded the cavity, the pickup cavity and control cavity with graphite paint. And then I also shielded the back of the pickguard with copper foil tape. Put a bone nut and did a complete fret dressing, level crowning, and filing and polishing. And yeah, this thing plays. There's no buzz anywhere on the fretboard. It's sustained for days. This is just a cool old bass. I like it a lot. So it's a great bass for a great dude, and I'm happy to have had it in the shop. So thank you so much for watching this episode of The Basement. Join me next time. I have no idea what I'm going to be doing, but it's going to be bass related, I can guarantee you that. See you next time.